Hey, welcome to Through the Noise. I'm your host, Ernesto Glucksman. My next guest spent 4 years at Tesla. I got a chance to ask him a lot of questions. Let's get started with the show. Farzad, thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm so excited to be here, man.
This is super cool that you're here. I can ask you questions about your experience. What I know it was 4 years, but you said it felt more like 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It's a lot of it. It's because of how freaking fast that company moves, It's almost like you just learn so much in such a short period of time, and you're faced with so many different challenges that typically would take multiple months to happen at a typical company, especially of that size. And Tesla's ability to move like a startup would, even sometimes even faster, to be honest, while having 100,000 people, is why it feels so much longer, because you just absorb so much more information in a short window of time. It's very unique.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. So for those that listen to the show and don't quite know you worked at Tesla for about 4 years, and you've done you've got interesting background. You were working in the supply chain side of aspects, but you were coding dashboards and trying to find efficiencies, help track things. So that's kind of the zone. But it's kind of cool. Well, there's so much to go into. So let's just dive right into this thing, man. One of the things that I find intriguing about this organization is the level of confidence it seems to have about the people that it has. So we know that there's some hierarchy in a sense, but it's not really. Just even from the very inception of you should feel responsible to actually email Elon Musk if there's an issue that that is of substantive note to impact the organization. You shouldn't be afraid of just communicating with the head guy, right?
That's right.
Which is quite the thing to offer. Like in a startup, a small business, maybe 100 employees. That's what's great about working in a small group. It's a lot of flexibility. There's way more to do than anybody can do. So everybody who's interested in one thing or the other, they can just shift. That exists. But 100,000 employees, that seems crazy to me. His inbox must be blowing up. But I admire that aspect of that business. Now, how does it get down to the day-to-day practical level is I'm still confused about. How does that actually permeate when you have that many employees? So tell us about the first day you walked in. I know you've said this in your show, but for the audience that I have, give us a sense of what it was like. How did you get just introduced into this space?
Oh man. Yeah, that day will forever. That's one of those memories that, when my last day on earth is there, that's one of those things that will come up, it's I'll think about it. It was very shocking in a way, because that trust that you talk about, right? It's Tesla seems very good at trusting its workforce to always focus on the right thing, do the right thing, work on the right thing. That was shown to me within the first 5 minutes. So literally, I arrived to the facility. I park in the parking lot, super excited. I'm literally freaking out because I'd been following the company for 4 years previous to joining it. So I'm dream job, dream position.
Fan. Now you're gonna work.
Exactly, super fanboy. I can already go in there and work, right? So it's amazing. I walk in. And literally within, obviously my boss greets me, hey, let's take you to your desk. They take me to my desk. My desk is in the middle of the warehouse. So I was on the supply chain side, and I was essentially helping bring this warehouse up to speed and helping the entire network become more efficient longer term. I walk in, my desk is in the middle of the warehouse. There is forklifts and all this equipment flying by safely. Everybody's got their vests on and everything, but it's this really crazy sort of mix of what would typically be called blue collar and white collar work, all in one area in the middle of the warehouse. And then within 5 minutes, I settled in, I opened my computer, I try to sign in, but my login doesn't work. That was a hilarious thing that happened the first time. I got to wait for my login. So I try to sign in, and then within a few seconds, my boss comes. I was like, okay, looks like you're settled in. Should we go for a quick tour? Sure. Takes me for a quick tour. We walk the areas, say hi to everybody. And then within 5 minutes of that, my boss points at a process that's having issues. And mind you, my title was analyst when I first joined the company, but I knew my responsibility was going to be bigger than that, because they tell you up front, you're going to be a problem solver more than anything. You're not going to be like pigeonholed to a position where you're here to problem solve. And within the first 5 minutes, he points out an outbound process, which I've never worked on before. It's more like like a process engineer or a civil engineer type sort of, work. And he's like, okay, Farzad, look at that thing. We need to figure out how to make this thing go at least twice as fast. I'll be back in a couple hours. Let me know what you figured out. Okay. And then I've never done this kind of work before, and I'm already expected to use whatever background I have to figure out how to solve this situation, and this would happen constantly, cross-functional work that you would never see yourself doing is a constant theme at Tesla. And then my first day, I worked on like 4 or 5 things I've never worked on before, because they're like, okay, this guy seems kind of smart. He should be able to help us fix this thing. And that was a theme that constantly happened. And then being, in my previous jobs, when I would go for my first day, it's usually kind of lax. It's a tour. Let's make sure you get settled in. Let's get you with HR. Let's review all the paperwork. No, it's like, okay, you're here to solve problems. Let's solve problems immediately. So that was a big shocker, and that was something that really took me aback. But I felt really very, very valuable and very valued, because from day one, they're like, let's get this going. And that was a theme that happened everywhere. So when I was there and we hired more people, that wasn't unique to me. Literally every single person went through the same process of just being basically thrown into the fire. I was like, here you go, figure it out. Let's get to it.
Like, I wonder if that could also be like extremely intimidating, right? You're like,
yes,
shit, what am I supposed to tell these guys that have been working on this process for how long? Like, why would I, like, I'm the new guy, right?
100%.
By the way, I was so excited to get you on this thing that I even forgot to put my mic. I don't want to do that right now, but like,
sure.
So you said that everybody went through the similar kind of like scenario. Hold on, I just got to get this in place.
Yeah. There I hear you.
Okay,
yeah.
Now it's better. There we go.
Your tone has changed.
Yes, now it's richer. Okay, I'm gonna leave all this in there. Listen. So they throw you into this thing, but the role. I guess that was hard. Probably hard to remember this inventory control role that you're in. Can you just kind of give us a taste of what that role is about? So what you're supposed to do, or what you knew you were going to be doing, and then what happened after that.
Sure. Yeah. So the role was based around essentially making sure that the inventory at the facility is accurate, creating tools to track that accuracy, helping with reslotting, which basically means optimizing the positions of the products in the warehouse so that you have the shortest path to get it. Exactly. And the quickest path to get it out of the warehouse. So it was work around that. So trying to make inventory accurate and efficient, and then figure out how to take that and put it in other buildings as well, longer term. But in reality, that immediately morphed into, you're doing that. And you're also building dashboards for the entire operation, not just for this building, but for the entire North American operation. You're building dashboards for the international locations. You're going to help us build outbound processes. You're going to help us build inbound processes. You're going to help us figure out how to figure out and make the upstream supply chain more efficient, right? So now you're working with the supply chain analysts and all these different folks that are trying to work upstream to make it more efficient, because that impacts your operation. If you're getting tons of trucks that are filled with product you're not going to use, right? You need to influence the upstream so you don't get stuck doing that work, because that's wasted work. So it just morphed into this gigantic role that basically, we were essentially responsible for influencing the entire network, not just that building. And again, that was a very common theme. It was very quick that your work goes from local, like small, literally like 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden your work becomes much more larger scope. But that's the beauty behind how Tesla has the company structured, is that it's really just a collection of problem solvers, and then those that want to solve problems rise to those situations, and then their career is defined by their accomplishments. It's like the most merit-based company exposure I've ever had. Like usually you would have, my previous experiences weren't like heavy politics, like in the workforce, but you can see how they could influence certain decisions or certain outcomes. And Tesla, it almost seemed like a perfect, logical place where If you do good, valuable work, you're going to get recognized. You're going to go to the next step, and you're going to keep doing more valuable work, because Tesla needs that help. They're building this entire industry from scratch. So unless they fill that company up with a ton of problem solvers, it's going to take either a long time or they're never going to get there. And the way they've structured the company is like, just toss a bunch of problem solvers together. Let's go solve some problems and let's figure it out. I
mean, did they, I was listening to somebody else recently that did they have could you just like after you're done your day, could you sort of like meander into other areas of the factory to like see what's going on or did you feel like there's that sense of like you could do that if you wanted to?
Yeah. So I wasn't exposed too much to the manufacturing side of the business, but I can tell you that Tesla in general does a really good job of empowering people to figure out how to bring value anywhere in the company. Right. So meandering in that sense, it's trying to find, like, you have an idea, like say you're walking by a line or a part of the process. You're like, that looks like something could be better there. Right. Tesla, the leadership structure, the way it's built is like, if you find something, try to fix it. See if you can try to fix it, right? At the very least, raise it up so that we can get after it and fix it. And so I could very much see how in the factory side, that could very much be the case. Now, the important factor there is that there's still core roles, like core things you have to do, right? Because if you can't just drop every project and be like, I feel like checking this thing out. No, like you're already working on a lot of things. You got to get those. But depending on what your priority structure is with those projects, and if you're able to kind of crank them out, or you have a schedule that makes you confident that I'm going to be able to get this done in time, Tesla very much encourages people to try and figure out how to solve problems anywhere, or at least try to get exposed to certain things. Because a lot of times what people don't realize is that there's just so many connections upstream and downstream, especially in supply chain, that if you figure out how to solve something upstream, the downstream becomes a factor of 10. It's like exponential, logarithmic almost. So that's the kind of thought process you always have to have, is like, okay, where can I make the biggest amount of impact so that the whole gets better? And that's sort of that first principles approach that Elon always talks about. And unless you see it, you don't really know it's there as an opportunity. So that's why it's encouraged to try to find as many opportunities as possible.
And I would imagine like as complicated as just scaling up like, auto product manufacturing, it's like, it's 1,000 different things that, have to be there when it's needed to be installed, but not be too much, because then you have a warehouse full of getting in the way of the other things you need. And like,
that's right.
What do you bring into the part of the line when it's the most needed to be attacked? Like, and making sure that the supply chains keep backfilling that. So there's a queue of all those products. So the more complex the widget, or in this car, the more complex the supply chain monitoring, tracking, and all that has to be, right? It's weird because I've had the same, like I've worked for a large companies. It was Vario, NTT. It was in the software world back in the .com. So it's a long time ago, and software was terrible then. Things did not work, in the web world. But it was weird because even though we had they talked a good game of like, we're all a team, we're all working together. It was really siloed. I was in the back of some like with other tech guys, and like the sales guys always had, they were sort of in the office, but not really. They were doing this, but it's the same problem. They're making a deal where now we have to do the manufacturing of that process. And it was constantly running into issues where they oversold something or underestimated something. It's just a total, and I kind of like in reflection upon that, they didn't really encourage us to just go over this, hang out with the sales guys. Like we should hang out with them. We should like, how do you do this? How do you negotiate this? Like, why are you saying this as opposed to that? It's very much more structured, just because I guess that's just the way everybody did it. So it just sounds interesting that it sounds like it's different. But what I'm curious about in the way now is like, how do you actually track the value that somebody's contributing in this whole process? Like, what it sounds like this is part of your world too. If you're
right.
I think in one of your highlights of your career here, you're sort of like, you wrote something like increase bin inventory accuracy from less than 80% to greater than 98%, which is like, in the bin, do we know what's the stuff in there? That's important. And if it's less than 80% sure that that's the stuff, you're going to be bringing a lot of bins, hoping that right?
Right. You're going to run out of inventory left and right without knowing you're running out of inventory,
Right. So
right?
you can focus on like, just how do we track the products that go into the bin? So I know that when the ticket or the request comes up for it, that it's accurate. But how do you go beyond that, right? Like, how do you make sure that you are chasing down a potential added value mechanism that can make a big difference versus all the different priorities that probably exist that keep getting thrown at you, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the $1 million question. It's like, how do you sift through all the different opportunities that are out there, especially for a company like Tesla, where again, it's really in its infancy if you compare it to the other legacy automakers that have been around for 100 years, right? There's still a lot to be built. I mean, that's the most difficult part of the job, by far. And the way I try to do it, speaking from my experience, is fortunately with my background, I was a BI director, pricing manager, pricing director. So, and in Tesla, I built dashboards, KPIs, how to team of analysts. So data is part of my vocabulary, it's a lot of just sitting down and really thinking about the core problem and saying, okay, so what are the different variables that are being impacted here? Like truly, like, is it just a warehouse specific problem in this example, or is it impacting the whole chain, right? And then for each one of those things, you have to say, okay, let me quantify what that specific thing is, right? So if it's like, if it's a transportation issue, or we're trying to make the shipping of product more efficient to the customers, and we're trying to figure out what mode to ship it in, or however, then it's a lot of like, okay, let's identify every single variable. Let's quantify what that variable cost is today, or that efficiency of that variable is today. And then let's to the best of our ability, devise a solution or a replacement for that, and then quantify what that solution would be, right? And sometimes that's a lot of trial and error, is quantifying what that new solution is going to be. And that's where Tesla's pace of innovation, so like the constant iteration, constant change is almost like a test bed. So it allows you to instead of waiting for somebody to approve for you to do it, you just do it. You take a small sample, you do the thing, and then you quantify what the change is. If the number is better, then you put it in everywhere, and then you track it again. Okay, is it getting better everywhere? Yes.
Is it actually working? Right.
Exactly. And then you just keep doing that step over and over and over and over again. That's where Tesla really encourages you to do that. Like, you don't get penalized for trying things, because a lot of the times when you try something, it will break. Like, I would say my success rate at Tesla was higher than 50%. And that is all it takes. As long as you're higher than 50%, if you're batting, I'm not a huge baseball guy, but I guess if you're batting above average, then or above losing batting average or whatever, you're fine. And that's how you're encouraged to try things. Because especially in the data world, with my background, it's almost like people are expecting you to predict what's going to happen to try and justify putting something in when it's never been tried before. And I don't see how that is a useful way of executing unless you sit down and actually do the thing. You just got to do it in a small scale and execute against it and see what happens.
What's that beta release of this effort? How
exactly.
Get that quickly. Oh, that works with some shoestring here. Okay, it does do this better. Our assumption here is that this can be applied across the rest of the supply chain.
Yeah, and then scale it
to a new group. See, and then you're looking for the outliers. Well, why didn't it? Maybe it
exactly
messed up an input on one of the other things. Well, that's a more complicated process, and then you learn why that process is the way it is, right? So it's sort
exactly
of interesting. I was just contemplating, like, I do a lot of work with the web world, and I think when Google Analytics started coming out, you had all these like things you could measure, but it's like so much was built on top of the fact of like clicks and impressions, and just it's summarizing here, but it's sort of like, just because we can measure it, then we should somehow make a dashboard out of it. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's not true either. Like, you can waste a lot of time and creating a lot of noise that has no real tangible difference in at the end of the day. I think some of that's coming around. I think some of that's like, you got to still test. If you're going to do a paid ad campaign, you got to put your best foot forward, your call to action, what you offer, design it in the way you think people might want to read it.
Yeah.
And then you got to test it, and then you got to see, and then you got to make an incremental change and then compare to the
Yeah.
prior and see if you can track, because you're dealing with, like, especially on web world, you're dealing with human emotion and people's interest,
Yeah.
lack of time.
For sure. I
There's a,
have an analogy for that I always use, like the
you got,
paralysis by data, is
yeah.
so the way I always describe that to the people I was mentored is like, okay, so if somebody, like, story I tell is somebody reaches out to you and they say, okay, can you build me a horse so I can go on this beautiful trail by the mountainside? And then just, enjoy it with my friends. My friends are bringing their horses. Can you build me a horse, in the next couple of days? And then the analyst or the person that's building that tool, like, yeah, sure, no problem. I got you. And then they go back and they're like, okay. And they start building the horse. They're like, but what if I add this laser here? What if I add this door here? What if I add some rocket boosters, right? And then they end up building this spaceship that's like 10 times bigger than a horse. And it's 2 weeks late because in their head, they're like, look at how many different things I got going on. It's not just your ask. And then they bring the spaceship. And then the guy's like, okay, thank you for building a spaceship 2 weeks later than I needed it. But this thing is not going to fit in the trail that I'm trying to take it on this horseback ride for. It's like, I just need a horse. I just need this one very simple thing. And that's the sort of analogy I always try to drive with people, is like, just because you can generate the data or just because the data seems to describe something good, that's not the right thing to really track the things by. You have to spend so much time to figure out exactly what are the key variables that are impacting the business or that specific thing you're trying to solve, and just do that. You can typically track everything with 3 or 4 metrics, and everything else is noise, like for a specific thing you try to solve, sometimes even 2. Yeah, it's simplicity wins in that scenario.
Is that part of the idea of, like, the sort of first principles echoes
Yes.
of Elon to, like, all right, we'll just get to the most rude elementary thing solution, and then you can later elaborate on that. You can later scale that, but we got to get to know if this even tracks in a better direction
100%
before
right.
you over engineer something, right?
100% right.
I mean, that's kind of the agile development approach in the software world. But
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think, at least from the software developer's perspective, like, agile development has a very fundamental component of creating the test case. Like, you write the thing you're trying to test the thing against first. And then you write the functions or the objects to run on through it, right? Like, if you don't have good test cases, then when you make a change in your code base, you run the risk of breaking. So in other words, agile development, at least in the web development world, is really like, take whatever the client suddenly decided they wanted and rearrange your priorities to do it. But they're not building they're not testing against performance. They're just trying to make sure that we're getting towards what the client sort of wants on a I don't know, maybe the enterprise level guys are like, no, we do test case based testing. But to the extent that this existed in your world, like, how do you when you're creating these processes, you're trying to improve them, how do you then like, once you get a process that actually works, how do you make sure that you can automate some of that so that you don't have to keep wondering if that process continues to work, right? Especially the very manual stuff.
I mean, automation's there from the beginning. So it's like every time we're trying to build that thing, we're always trying to also say, okay, how do we automate this thing? So if it's a KPI, if it's a tool, right? I mean, we built tools, and I can't get into too much specifics because of an NDA, but there are tools that were like, one of the biggest highlights that I had over there at Tesla was there was something was being released that was excruciatingly manual, like, and it was for the sake of quality. And the quality measure that they were measuring after they implemented was ambiguous. Like, is it actually improving quality? Because it says, okay, the process will do it, but then the mechanisms of the process were so clunky that it yes, if a human being is perfect, it will improve quality, but you're assuming a human being is perfect, right? But we were then able to, with the solution that we came out, the solution was automated already. So it's like, okay, instead of having this clunky manual process, we're just going to allow the system to flag us when we need to check for quality, instead of forcing humans to force the quality. We instead did the reverse. We got notified when the system knew 100% of the time that there was a quality issue, and then we ran to the quality issue. We said, okay, this is what happened. We log it. And then we're like, cool. Okay. So now we have a specific failure point here in the quality aspect. And then we work with the teams a little bit upstream for that process to say, okay, how can you implement the thing where this never happens ever again? Right. And that was just a constant cycle over and over and over
that's
again.
sort of outcomes driven. Like, what's the outcome
Exactly.
that we need to achieve? How do we measure that the outcome, that they reach that particular outcome? And then how do we notify that person, even though it's a manual process? How do we notify the person that they're not hitting it, so that they know that they got to like ratchet up a little bit more attention,
exactly.
right?
And then the variables that would drive that quality failure then start becoming automated as well. Then you like to start saying, okay, so this thing that broke, is it a system measurable thing, like something that you can draw from the system that will describe when this failure point happened? And then we were able to do that. You know, something broke and then somebody got a notification. Hey, this thing broke with your team specifically, so that nobody even has to go walk to you, right? That is constant.
That's
It's always
key. That's the key to like making, that's the key to giving you guys so much freedom, is because you can rely on the automation of the testing.
Yes.
So these are these are the checks along the process, but you don't want to have somebody sitting there with a clipboard doing it.
Right.
You know, like the QC, quality assurance, you want the system to automate that feedback immediately. So then if you make a change to that process, you can see if it actually passes through the battery of automated tests that have existed, probably even forgotten at some point. It's just in the system. You haven't even looked at it, but suddenly it shows up a red flag from an old, you know, check, and you're like, oh, why is it doing it? Well, now I got to find, you know, talk to the guy who actually made that. Why is that important? Right. And then you're learning again the essence of each step, right? Did I describe that?
Yeah, 100%.
I wish we could actually do an example, because it's hard, right? But I don't want you to get in trouble with the NDA.
Right. Yeah. I want to be very careful here. But like the other thing too is like the other thing to keep in mind is just because, so those things are super helpful, but then what ends up happening as well is because Tesla moves so fast, the entire process itself can change completely. And then you have to recreate some of those tracking tools, because the variables you had linked to maybe describe a quality issue or something, then they get changed because of how now you're tracking that specific. It's a completely different process. So then you have to implement different things. So even the testing procedures were being updated constantly, right? That depended on what the process was, because the process themselves were changing so often. So it's like constant change.
You can see it in software, like, you know, really popular systems, suddenly they have a great customer base, and for the fundamentals of it, they don't change, because they just change the UI. They try to add a feature on a layer, but they can't rip out they're too afraid to restart, to re-architect the whole thing. Right. But it sounds like in this area, you're re-architecting the test cases all the time as part of the process. And it's just the cost of doing business. It's just the innovation improvements and outcomes are too valuable not to just, all right, this whole library of tests things get thrown out, because we have a new supplier, a new part, a new thing that's just better for any number of things. I'm sure you do the cost benefit analysis before you do that, right?
Yeah. Of course.
Teams.
Of course.
But that, you know, out with the old, in with the new, right?
I mean, even sometimes, like, we do, but sometimes when there's certain folks that are just very intuitively good at understanding what a positive impact is. And if it's not a far too reaching thing where it's like, okay, now we're talking about millions of dollars, or, you know, multiple teams are going to get impacted by this, we'll just do it. We're like, screw that. We'll just freaking do it. Because again, like, we're almost encouraged to break things. We're encouraged to break things in a way. Like, it's like, just try it. Just try it. Just go in and try it. Like, understand what you're impacting. And sometimes you'll change something and you're like, oh crap. Like, I hurt more than I thought. And then they're like, and then like, okay, well, 24 hours, fix it, you know, like, and then you sit down and fix it. But it is even more freeing than that. You know, it's like, you can literally just, especially at the building that I worked at, and Greg, who was the leader of that building, was so great at pushing that Tesla ethos of just, let's just try to make things better. And if we break it, it's okay. Like, it's completely fine. At least we tried. And that's something that Elon always talks about too. He's like, I forget exactly how he says it, but it's like, people that try and fail should be rewarded more than those that don't try at all.
Hmm.
right? And that's part of that Tesla ethos is like, don't be afraid of failure. Just try to make it better. We hired you for a reason. We hired people that we trust. Try to make it better. And if you don't, learn from it and then try again tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much out there in the world of work that's, people finally get something working well enough where they don't have to, yeah, I guess try as hard. They have their
Mm,
little, way of doing it, and they expect
mm,
every other colleague to always filter in their
mm,
manner. But it's very me centric. If I'm going to clock in my 9 to 5, I don't, your emergency is not my problem. Doesn't
yeah.
sound like that's the case in this environment.
No.
This is beyond my work, my particular duties, my workload could be impacted totally if for the
100%.
right reasons. And I'm just gonna have to just go along because the push is the constant, like, how do we do this just better, right?
100%.
That sounds like an exhilarating environment, also stressful,
Hmm.
also probably want to do it while you're young, while you can. Maybe that's the tenure. The tenure at Tesla is 4 years, according to Farzad, and that's cool. The other thing that I found that intriguing about the handbook I had come across,
Yeah.
that it was openly okay if you had something else, if you had another, obviously they want you to have your best energy for the company, but if you have some other little side hustle business thing or interest, that as long as it doesn't impact the company, that's
Yeah.
fine. So
Yeah.
many companies out there just so, like, they just want to tighten down on all that. Like,
Mm.
no, anything you even think about outside of business hours is our intellectual property, and
Yeah.
just
It's so weird, right? And I think
fortunate.
that's where it's like, I think Tesla's like humanity is not well understood because I think the thing that gets reported often in the news, and I feel like I can say this confidently because I have seen the belly of the beast, right? A lot of the things you see out in the media, it's like, or the things I come across anyway. I don't want to speak for the whole media, but Elon is a slave driver. Tesla is a terrible place to work. People anti-union. All these different things that they're talking about. And then while I'm working there, I'm like, this is like the most liberating place I've ever been at. Because while I was at Tesla, a large majority of my time there, I also owned a small business with my wife. My wife
Yeah, I
ran it
saw
on the side,
a human versus room escape room,
an
right?
escape room. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
super cool.
It's sick, and I was able to do that while I was working at Tesla. Now it was freaking grueling, and
Sure.
I probably lost like 3 years of my life doing it. Those two things in parallel. I don't recommend that you should run a business and work at Tesla at the same time. But if you want to, great. People have different levels of being able to stay engaged. I know my limits that I learned from that. I'm not going to do that ever again, but others probably can. It was very liberating, right? And it was very much that. It's like if you're fine here and you work your ass off and you're trying to do the right thing, you'll be completely fine. And I think honestly, long term, especially think about all the people that have worked at Tesla and will work at Tesla when they learn that how Tesla operates, which is, in my opinion, one of the most optimal ways to run a business, right? Trust the people, like hire good people and trust them. That has the potential to completely revolutionize how businesses are run. And those that don't adapt to that are just going to lose people left and right to those companies that operate that way. And then they're going to go out of business eventually, right? And I think this is especially important for Tesla's direct competition because Tesla's products are a direct reflection of how they run their business. Like the Model S, the Model X, the Model Y, everything else that they're building is a reflection of that, of how that business is put together, how that business is structured. Those products can't be possible unless you have that sort of business structure, right? And long term, that is, I think, one of Tesla's biggest advantages is because they are running like a startup who trusts its employees. And there are some variables there that are even hard to describe. Like I'm still thinking about certain things the company does. And I'm like, I don't know if this ever happens anywhere else. And I can tell some stories about that. But it's very unique. And I think ultimately, the more I think about it and the longer time away I'm from the company, it's like that is one of its true competitive advantages is how the business is run. Because the product that is born out of that is a reflection of that once again. So
I think so much of the motivations for people to just leave a good paying job and to try to strike it out on their own as an entrepreneur, to start their own business, is because what they really want is like something that is engrossing and that it grows. It's not about the money or I need more flexibility or any. At the end of the day, it comes from like this, like it's just so cool to work in your own thing if it's working. If it's not working, it's super stressful and super like draining. But the same thing if you're an employee, if it's working and if it's like it's growing and there's like the freedom to, put your mark into a group to make something even better.
Yeah.
That's what everybody wants to spend their time. They want to be felt appreciated for the effort they're putting into, and then see something get bigger beyond their scope, right?
Yeah.
If you got somebody who's micromanaging every step of the way and they're dictating and their decision making is terrible because they're removed from the front line anyway, just constantly just having to manage up. That's a major concept. And you're telling me that at Tesla, that's what felt like. It felt engrossing. Like this is just too cool. I'm missing out if I'm not at work.
Absolutely. And like having owned the business, like it really is like it's an entrepreneur's boot camp. That's what Tesla really is. And I called it an entrepreneur sandbox in one of my videos. I think it really is. Like, if you ever want to know how to own your own business, work at Tesla, because that's how you feel. It feels like you're running your own business, but a business is what you're working on. And then everyone else is working on a business, which is what they're working on. But it's very analogous because you have to be so creative with problem solving. And you don't need two tools to do your job. You need like 18 hats to put on to really understand how to make a big impact to your area, to what you're working on. Because again, you can influence downstream and upstream as well. It's very unique. Yeah. And what you described, like, I wish it wasn't so common. Like, there's no, like, really, like the if we're thinking from a first principles thinking, like it's like, why is that even a thing? Like, why does that even exist? And it's probably some mixture of human nature and maybe, some career gains. People are trying to just make it better for themselves. Right. But it's like,
you want to move up, so you have to work less. That's kind
of right. Yeah. But it's like, I think the only reason why that is potentially is because there isn't like a mission attached to it, that bigger than me thing that's attached to it. Right. And that's where Tesla, I think, has an advantage.
Yeah, I'm actually quite, let's just talk about a little bit of the dark side. I'm actually sometimes quite confused with like some of the polarizing reactions to I guess almost, you got to separate the Tesla company from the Elon brand, even though you can't. It's like it's just the thing. But how do you, I don't know. As soon as he became the world's richest, quote unquote, guy, it's like suddenly a bunch of friends of mine were like, oh, that guy, he's just on the backs of I don't know what. And I'm like, you're not. I don't think, I definitely know that they haven't listened to some of his talks. I definitely don't, because they would, it's not about the money. It doesn't sound like it's about the money at all to me at all. What can you tell me about some of that?
Yeah. I mean, like, it's super weird, I don't, like, okay, so first I want to start by saying, I don't think Elon is perfect, right? No one is perfect, right? And it's very important to also attach that to people that may just happen to be the richest person in the world. I'm not going to support absolutely everything he's ever said or done or whatever, because honestly, I don't even know the freaking guy. So like, I can't even really comment on who he is as a person. I'm not going to take some news outlets or some people who heard from people what they think about Elon. That doesn't mean shit to me, honestly. Like, I will comment on someone's character when I know them. Right. But I do think that the one weird thing that has happened is that sort of richest man in the world tag, for some reason, has either like said everything else you've done is null and void. You're just a crappy person because you have a lot of money. Oh, and by the way, the only reason why you got that money is to what you said. It's because, well, you have hundreds of thousands of people that you just work to death, and your money is not legitimate because we are in a broken system. But I think the thing that people miss, and this is sort of what draws me to him as a person, not as a deity or somebody who's like above me, it's as a person, an inspiration, is that he's been very transparent in how he's built these companies, right? we've seen him go through this journey himself of like trying to start up a Tesla or a SpaceX or a Solar City. And you can visibly see in his interviews that the dude looks like he's literally about to collapse. You can see it in his eyes. There's a humanity there that you can see. It's like, oh my God, this guy's in pain. His interviews and everything like that. And then when you personally see that he's busting his ass, trying to build these companies, countless stories and pictures of him being on the floor, busting his ass, trying to make things happen, especially from a point of leadership or power that he's in, that is so rare, and it hasn't stopped. It doesn't seem like it has stopped, right? Even to this point where he's the richest man in the world, there's still all these stories and all these recollections and sort of data around him being directly involved with building these things from the ground up, not because of the money, but because of the mission, right? And just because you get money from the value that mission brings, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. That's just the public saying, thank you very much for what you're doing. We see your product and services to be very, very valuable. Here is our way of saying, okay, cool. Now you're the richest person in the world by happenstance because he just happens to own a large part of his companies. It's a very illogical thing, right? That and again, I'm not saying all extremely rich people are good people. That's not what I'm saying either. But I'm saying, and specifically to Elon, it just appears like that those attack vectors are very illogical. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know how you draw the conclusion. Oh, you have a lot of money because your companies are really valuable. You're a shitty person. I don't understand that.
I think that some of that is like they're just check marking the ones they know, which is what? Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. They're just checking off. No one likes Mark Zuckerberg. So,
yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos. I mean, we all buy his stuff, and Amazon. We don't really like the guy. I mean, it's just like we're just check marking this notion, and then suddenly Elon rised up there. But the thing I had come across him years ago was, I was like, who's this guy? Who's this kid? Because he's basically he's our age. I mean, I'm probably a little older than you, but he's my age. And I'm like, who's this kid who's actually wants to try to like bring electric cars to the industry? Like, I just think like that one business was so ballsy, so like, when you read into the industry, like there hasn't been another successful car company, internal combustion car company in 50 years, much less an electric one. No one's even attempted it. GM tried. They killed it. Like it's like this wild notion that he could do it. I was just like, this is crazy. And I didn't really pay too much attention. And then over time, I just sort of tapped back into this story, and I'm like, wait a minute, they actually got a car out. They're actually doing it. Like, is this guy for real? That was the draw for me, because I didn't really even care until much further down when I realized, wow, this guy went almost broke multiple times. He put it all in there. He took this PayPal. He could have just taken his PayPal money, bought a small island, and lived next to Oprah or something. Like, he didn't have to spend it on this insane idea of bringing this car. Like, and I think if there's a wonderful blog by, what is it? Wait, but why? Wait, but why? If anybody has a question, if anybody's listening to this episode that's just wondering if you got the wrong impression, I challenge you to just pick up that blog. It's a wonderfully, enjoyably written discussion about all the other companies. Because let's be real. One car company should be somebody's like, capstone project of a lifetime. And then he goes off to do these other things, rocket ships that land by themselves. That was the other jaw-dropping moment for me. Like, I'll never forget. That's like trying to balance a broomstick on a rocket ship at the right moment with the right amount of pressure so that it doesn't crush it's so difficult. What the SpaceX was able to accomplish, if you even pierce into the engineering aspects of that challenge, it should just leave your jaw dropped. Yeah. But it's coming from the same guy, like the same investor into these things. Sure, he's invested teams of engineers, teams of people, but you don't just go to MIT and then hire, 20 kids and like, hey, land a rocket. That doesn't That's not how it works.
No.
It's decades, it's years of this effort.
Yeah.
This guy's been able to do it in our lifetime. So my hat's off to Elon. I just think, given that he is attempting to help us with addressing, the fossil fuel problem, and it finally lit a fire under the auto industry to actually get serious about doing this, because we're wasting time. If we left it up to Toyota, I'm going on a big rant here.
I love it. Keep going.
Toyota and Ford, they would have been playing defense on Congress with their lobbyists. They still are. Just keep sending them over there, trying to say, like, slow this all down. We need time. There's no time. There's no time. There's no time. Not because climate change. Let's say you don't care about climate change. There's no time because of Elon and Tesla.
Right.
They crush this. And I think that's part of the issue that I worry about the unions. They're going to suffer for sure because of what's happening. I don't know what the solution is. And I think maybe some of that risk in towards the unions is definitely surfacing. I think if you look at some of the discussions recently with the CEO of GM, you can kind of read between the lines that she's uncomfortable in that role. She's not delivering the sincerity that they're in trouble. Yeah. And they're going to need help in some way or another. There's a huge workforces that are going to have to, I don't know. Yeah. But listen, no one other than some tax credits, I guess. No one really went out of their way to help Tesla get into this position. And the people that worked there did it, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had to.
It was a very bootstrap effort, right? It's what's really interesting to me about that whole like GM union situation, especially as it relates to Tesla, is so I agree with you 100% with Mary, like being in a situation where she's uncomfortable. And one way that I've been able to learn when a company seems to be in trouble is when their leader is making a lot of public appearances, like on CNBC or with the government, because they're trying to rile up some excitement around the company. So that in itself, again, my opinion, I could be 100%
We don't
wrong.
know. This is
I don't know anything, right?
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm
just a 34-year-old dude.
I get a feeling, but I don't know what to tell you.
Same, 100%. But I do think, like, from a union perspective, and this is where, from a fundamental perspective, I don't have any problems with unions. I think unions can serve to be good, but I do wonder, like, in the 21st century, where like you have a lot of companies there's a lot of companies now, right? And the way I understand why unions exist is because their original function, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody on this that's watching on YouTube, post it in the comments if you don't mind. But like, one of the reasons why unions existed was because workers would be essentially tied to a company that essentially kind of monopolized a specific part of the region, and that company was abusing their workers, but the workers really couldn't go anywhere else because they were tied to this company to make a living. And so unions arose because the companies were treating their employees like garbage, right? And then that's why unions were born. And I mean,
part of the healthcare industry, before you could, you couldn't switch a company if you had a pre-existing condition, because it wouldn't be covered by the other insurance company. Sure. That was part there to keep labor forces tied, right? That's an aspect that definitely was a barrier that was in place to make this type of, but we're not in that world anymore. We're in a very fluid, very globalized, like knowledge-based, and I mean, again, I'm in the scenario where, we have to transition that industry. They're not going willingly. They weren't in a hurry to do it. On the contrary, they were trying to make sure it didn't happen. And so, and here we are. So,
it's hard to innovate.
I'm not blaming the unions for that. Let's just be clear. I wouldn't blame the unions for that.
Likewise.
But the leadership in the companies, something was just missed.
And I think it's hard to innovate too when you have a variable like a union that, at least from my understanding, seems to really value seniority and other factors outside of speed of innovation. It's almost like they have to standardize everything to make sure that everybody is getting paid fairly, being treated fairly, right? But if you take this to the extreme, you don't really allow change to happen nearly as quickly as you could. And if you have a company like Tesla, which in my opinion treats their companies, their people really well, They get paid well. The healthcare coverage at Tesla, which nobody talks about, is spectacularly good. Like my wife and I barely paid anything. We had full coverage for everything. The perks were amazing. They take care of you if you go on leave, parental leave, all these things. So if you have a variable like this going into the industry, a company that's treating their people really, really well, where a union is not really needed to come in and fix that problem, quote unquote, right? And then they're also innovating at a breakneck speed. I don't know how GM or Ford and any of these companies, Volkswagen, that have unions, I have no idea. Like, and I would love to be surprised, because the last thing I want is for these companies to go out of business. I have no idea how they innovate nearly quick enough to at least try and stay alive, let alone fail completely.
Yeah, I think it's going to be scary situation for them, because I don't know. I mean, how, some of these companies have, $100-200 billion in debt, right? Like they are going to transition, or they're projecting to transition based on their ability to sell the other cars. But man, there's a lot of indication here that, we don't know how long they can keep selling the internal combustion engine cars at the price points that they're used to shift into redoing factories or buying new factories. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's just mergers, acquisitions, and bankruptcies are in this world. And it's not I don't think it's for the lack of, like, I don't think it's anything that Elon and Tesla did. It's like towards them. They just try to start a car company that could run on batteries, period. Like that was, can you do that? Great. Yeah. That was the ethos. They've succeeded, not just succeeded. It's incredible, the level of scale. I think this year, everything I've been reading and all the analysts report, I mean, that's the thing that I think this year is going to really demonstrate, given that they're going to open a couple of, new factories. So as far as I'm a Tesla fanboy for sure now, it's like, damn. And I just, let me ask you this question, just sort of back to the role you were in, like, how many, like, what's it, could you just, I mean, I don't know, the average employee, when they, like, I heard somewhere they had, they had mobile phones that could kind of tell you some of the business unit metrics. Could you describe what they might be looking at, or what the sort of, what were the numbers that bubbled up? And I guess it depends on the role they're in, but
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it really depends. So the one you're referencing, I believe it was an interview with Joe Justice with Alejandro Sauquillo, I think it was, which was an excellent talk. Those that listen to this, I would encourage you to go check that out. Joe Justice. So those tools he talked about specifically, I did not have exposure to those. So maybe those are factory specific tools that he's talking about. But I was in charge of building out dashboards and KPIs, and my team as well, for the distribution network, not just in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, but across the network. And those employees, as soon as they walk in the door, will have dashboards that describe all the key functions and all the key areas in the building. And those are updated by this every 30 seconds. I could literally have it update every second if I wanted to, but it was constantly updating. So then the thought process behind that is that regardless who you are or where you are, these numbers are very easy to understand, and they describe how you're performing versus the rest, how your area is performing, how key metrics in that area are performing, and we have them customized for each one of those roles, right? So and the development of those are, again, constant, because the team was on the floor. My desk was literally next to the place where the paper gets dispensed to put into the boxes, so that there's dunnage, so that stuff doesn't move around and break. That thing was loud as hell, so I had to put some headphones on and try to concentrate sometimes. You're
not in some gilded office in some other part of the you're like right there.
No, exactly. I mean, you had the beautiful thing about Tesla, and this is like a very interesting dynamic. I mean, you could have millionaires walking side by side and working 24/7 with folks that have literally just entered the company, and this is the first job they've had. And that's the beauty behind it. It's like the people there are not defined by money. They're not defined by how they look or where they come from. It's just, let's just get here and get stuff done. But that really works its way into what I was just talking about, because then you can really collaborate with anybody there to try and make a KPI or a dashboard better. But not just that, it's really everything.
I want to ask about the, I guess maybe you don't have insights into this area, but did Did you guys ever look at like, so everybody's working hard, putting in extra hours, it just feels probably, not pure, it's just everybody's doing it. Everybody's so engrossed in it that you
You're
just kind
inspired.
of like just get lost in your work, right? The best kind.
Yes.
You're in that flow state type thing, right? But did everybody ever think about like, you probably really have optimally in a day, you have like probably 6 hours of
Hmm.
like fresh mind, fresh energy that I'm concentrating on. And then after that, it drops off precipitously, right? Like after that, it's like I can keep grinding or I can go home, get some rest
Hmm.
to start over. And if you only have 6 hours of optimal, did anybody ever consider like what about creating shift work around this type of processes with like 30-hour work weeks, 6 days a week? I mean, 6 hours a day. You come in, do some work, then you no.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think, well, it's not part of the discussion because Tesla trusts its employees to always be optimal, right? So like
Okay.
maybe the discussions weren't part of it, but really what ended up happening is that oh man, I don't know, like especially earlier on where I was so like super fresh to me, it felt very addicting. It was such a weird thing. I could work for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for months at a time and not feel like I had to take a break just because of how much of a
So
reward you
interesting.
got. Exactly. But I think it also that's very unique to the person. I'm probably insane and I'm stupid, and that's why I found joy in that, right? So I think each person is very different, but the one variable that Tesla does have is that the work is for those that find inspiration on it is very inspiring, and you're surrounded by others who also find it very inspiring, and then you're working on very difficult problems together. And so it almost feels like you're going to war against this existential threat. And then
Mm.
when you're getting closer to the solution, it feels exhilarating. And then you get to talk about it with other people that also find it very, very exhilarating. And that's
That's a
kind of like yeah.
Man, I don't hear that you're in the trenches feeling. I mean, it's like I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's what you hear out of the military, right? Like people re-sign up not because war is great, but because of like the bonding and the connection you have with working together in the most dangerous possible environment, right? Like you're not
Yeah.
in a dangerous environment, you're in a super challenging environment, but that's what makes it so great. So
Yeah.
staying home is kind of like missing out at the party. You're like
Yeah.
where everybody's
Exactly.
having fun.
Exactly. And that's why I think there's a lot of vets that work at Tesla too. Like I worked with a lot of
Mm.
vets and I never heard them say it directly, but I think that's why they're so attracted to that company. And I think that's why Tesla in a way seeks out those kind of people. I was never in the military, but it's like
It's
that kind
built
of
into the
mentality.
military. Yeah,
Yes.
they're like, here's your mission. You go figure out how to accomplish it. Whatever it
Yes.
is, whether it's, support services or actually trying to get to
Yeah.
the enemy. I mean, it's like that's part of the leadership ethos. They've cracked that aspect in the
Yes.
military, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you're evaluated on the outcomes of the mission. And if it didn't go right, then you have to take responsibility for what didn't go right, right? And
Yep.
that's just part of it. So,
Yep. 100%.
uh,
Yeah, you saw that those were very common themes at Tesla. It's almost like, and like now that we're talking about it, I wonder is like, does Tesla know that? And they're like, we're going to war against the climate, or we're going to war against a bad future. Like maybe that sort of mentality is very analogous, and it does appear like that because these folks are like so focused on the mission, and it's so hard. They never waver. It's like it doesn't matter how I feel, how painful it is, what we need to do. We're freaking doing it. And you're looking at them, you're like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. But my brain hurts and my body's about to collapse. Give me like 2 hours, let me rest up, and then let's get after it, right? Depending on where you are in that process of like trying to get yourself in the right state of mind or whatever. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's really, really interesting.
do you I guess you do miss it, I would say a little bit. Was
Yeah.
the decision to leave to pursue the next era of your life, which sounds like it's awesome,
Yeah.
possibility. Was that a tough one to figure out?
It was. I thought about it for like 6 months. It was one of those things that once I got, one of the very beautiful things that we've been able to experience working at Tesla and having certain investments in Tesla and other things is that my wife and I have reached a financial stability and security at a very young age. I'm 34, my wife's 31. I'm actually turning 35 in like a week and a half, and I'm like, at the point I was like, I don't care anymore. Like, don't celebrate my birthday anymore. Because it's like, I don't like those numbers anymore. But anyway, so it seemed like we had this gift from the universe that we really wanted to capitalize on. You know, it's time to travel, time to spend more time with each other. And that became very, very, very attractive to the point where I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, of course, I loved working at Tesla, and I loved working with the people there as well, which is what really made it difficult. It meant that I wouldn't get to work with these people anymore. And it was extremely difficult. But after some point, I really asked myself, I was like, okay, so why it became like kind of philosophical. It's like, why are you alive? Like, why are you here? Like, do you just want to work for Tesla for the rest of your life? Or do you want to figure out who you are as a person to see where your talents can be better served for society? So maybe it is Tesla. Maybe I do go back and I'm like, I figure out, okay, maybe I should have been there my whole life. But I don't know. There are certain things that I really want to, I want to do. Like, I think there's bigger things that I can do that are outside of one company, and traveling and seeing other cultures and really learning about humans more is something that is very interesting to me right now. One of the main reasons why I wanted to sit down and talk to you as well, because like I have a new fascination with getting to know people and talk to very brilliant people and smart people. Is like, it's giving me a lot of energy, and it's giving me a lot of purpose. Just to talk to other people, especially in this world that we live in now, that it's so divided and weird. I find myself so attracted to this, like you and I sitting down, we've never met before. We've had only one other conversation. And this feels like a very refreshing, deep conversation I'm having with somebody. And I crave that. And I want to have that over and over and over again. So that's my new addiction, I guess, is talking to people.
Well, that, you know, when I started the podcast 8 years ago, that was exactly the draw I had. I mean, I there's several reasons we started this podcast, Through the Noise, and you know, we're in Washington, DC, and I wanted to meet, you know, some of the folks that work at these nonprofits that's where the focus. If you go to the early, anybody's listening, go to the early ones, you'll see just a slew of nonprofits that I've had. I was really trying to understand how the nonprofit sector worked and all the different variations. And then, yes, there is an association, a nonprofit for every walk of life, everything in this world. And it's very complicated. And what I really appreciated was finally able to get just an hour. It's not that much time with somebody who's been at a very high level, you know, position with the view of a particular industry or a particular charitable need, and could tell us the story of what's in there. Like, once I started that process, I just couldn't stop. I mean, this is it's just, I don't know. It's just something about it to be able to get an opportunity to talk to you, Farzad. I really appreciate it. I saw you pop up because I do follow some other Tesla channels. I was like, wait, this guy. I got to talk to this guy. This guy's, I mean, I wish you the best. And I think you're right. You should uncover all the rocks, because there's nothing more tragic, I think, to go through life with what could it have been if I had done that? And I could have, but I was just too afraid, or to whatever issues that keeps you from trying, you know. It doesn't sound like Tesla's the kind of company like, once you leave, you can never come back. That's their role. They want you, if you want to be there, you've proven yourself. It sounds like they'll have you back, but they want you to be sure that you want, you know, that's the thing. So find out. I think absolutely. I can't wait to keep following your channel and keep following the next like adventure you go. Like, when are you going to start the travel part?
We have a trip planned probably in April. We're going to Guyana, which is where my wife was born. So it's like North South America. It's like north of Brazil. She has some family there, and I want to really experience that culture. So that's pretty cool. I've been to Ireland before, but we're going back to Ireland, I think, in the summer. I really want to show my wife. I fell in love with Ireland. I think we're going to visit like Southern Ireland. We have South Korea on deck, I think, for this year as well. So like, those are the three major big ones that we're going to do. And then we're going to sprinkle in some domestic stuff there. Like, we've never been to the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, stuff like that. So we're going to do that and see what we can do, you know, and then each year we'll kind of figure out, you know, year by year where we want to go visit. I have a whole list of countries, but like, those are the three that we kind of landed on that we want to visit right now. And yeah, we'll see where it takes us. It's who knows? I mean, who knows where this is going to take? This is like an open-ended plan. I have no idea what the hell's going to happen.
I think, and you're going to take the kit. You're going to go on the road with it, right? You're going to do the tapings on the road and maybe meet people, other Tesla fans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you just give us one watershed moment for you, anecdotal aspect about if you can just contemplate a moment this kind of blew your mind in your experience with, the 12 years of working at Tesla, something that that might come to mind.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that really blew my mind from the aspect of like, is Tesla's empowering thing, really just a thing that I'm experiencing, or is it something that everybody's experiencing? Is it like a thing that's truly that the company has been built this way, or did I experience it? The one thing that always sticks out to me is that we had a facilities guy. His name's Mike, and his job was to come in and clean bathrooms, clean the warehouse floor or whatever. But he had a talent with his hands. He's good with his hands. He can, use power tools to build stuff, right? And within the first week, he was building tools for the operation that then were used at other facilities as well. So he went from janitor to tremendous efficiency improvement for the distribution network. Okay. And I don't know in what other world that happens, right? Where you can have somebody come in that is even societally is viewed as the janitor. He's just here to clean stuff. And then he's legitimately building these things that were saved so much time and so much effort. And then the leadership structure, instead of saying, oh no, you shouldn't allow them to do that, he's just a janitor, they're like, hell yeah, how can we get that everywhere? How can we make that happen everywhere? Freaking blew my mind. And from that moment on, I'm like, yeah, no, this is different.
This is the space. This is the right spot.
Yeah. This is rare.
All right, you heard it from Farzad. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for coming by. Let's do this again. Yes. Let me keep evolving into this space. Through the noise, I'm just exploring innovative approaches, and as we all figure out ways to adapt to the changes that are coming. And I think the Tesla story is it's the capstone of that aspect. If the more you can look into this world, the more you'll understand, I think, that it's an exemplary company for sure. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, totally. Yeah. This was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd love to be back. We should pump your YouTube channel.
Sure. Yeah. So the way people can find me. So if you go to YouTube, just type my full name, Farzad Mesbahi, Farzad Mesbahi. I also have a Twitter @Farziness, FARZYNESS. And I also have a website, farzadmesbahi.com. That's just for me. I'll be releasing a book sometime this year, I'm hoping. I've been sort of journaling and writing down all my thoughts. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be around I'm trying to really pass on my learnings to those that want to have it, and I've had a very unique exposure to different things, not just culturally, but also through work and stuff like that I feel like I've been very lucky in my journey, and there are some nuggets there that I want to share with others as well. So that'll be coming out sometime this year. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Thank you so much again. This was such a blast. I can't believe this is the fastest hour of my life.
It just blew by. We could probably keep going. Unfortunately, I got another proposal to work on. So
it's all good. Yeah. Hey. But I'll be back anytime. I'd love to talk to you again. And yeah, man, thank you so much for your time.
Definitely keep in touch, and we'll add those links into the show notes too. For those of you that are driving around right now, you don't have to scribble it down yet. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Visit throughthenoise.us for more episodes and subscribe to our newsletter. This show is produced by Through the Noise Consulting, uniting external communications and internal IT functions to ensure data and privacy are protected while creating innovative communications platforms. Want to start your own podcast? We can help. Visit getthroughthenoise.com to learn more.